All right, then we're ready for round two. We're here with our 8th district candidates. I'll introduce them in a second, but just a reminder that we ask that everyone in the audience please use the green and red cards for approval and disapproval. There's also these question cards in the back. You can submit them, have your question answered in real time. We have some of them right here that we'll ask throughout these next 40 minutes, and we'll definitely ask more of them as they come down. So we want to welcome our two 8th district candidates. We'll have the same format as last time, 90 seconds for opening remarks, and 60 seconds to answer each question.
Other way around.
Other way around. 60 seconds for opening remarks, 90 seconds for answering each question. We have Gutierrez first. He's a nonprofit consultant. He spent 25 years in executive management and leadership of nonprofits. He led fundraising at Chicago Hope Academy, Christian High School, and he was with the Catholic Charities of the Archdiocese of Chicago. And we have Felix Ponce. He's a music teacher at Richard High School in Oak Lawn. He's a former CPS band director at Back in the Arts College Prep, and he has a top rating as a Senate to CPS. So, Mr. Gutierrez, if you want to start, please with your opening remarks.
Good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to start by thanking the organizers to put together this wonderful event. My name is Nader Issa, and I've been 25 years of executive management experience. What does that mean? That I've been the chairman of the board of directors, I've been the CEO of a nonprofit, and I have held many executive leadership roles. So I know how to manage almost $1 billion in my career in contracts, but I also know how to raise money. I've spent a lot of time in Springfield and Washington building relationships across the aisle and getting things done for our community in the city of Chicago, in the wide variety of communities that we serve. When I was at Catholic Charities, when I lived in Denver, and while I was at Chicago Hope Academy. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Felix Ponce. I have dedicated my professional career in creating more opportunities for students in CPS across the city, whether that was to be coaching tennis, coaching volleyball, creating a band program. The first one I had at Gutierrez College Prep was a community wanted, creating a mariachi program, working at the People Music School and trying to supplement what was not happening in CPS, but doing it in the nonprofit realm, and then also an adjunct professor at Roosevelt University, where we get a lot of CPS students who get some studies in their music programs and they come to Roosevelt, or they just come to learn because they never had an opportunity in CPS. And what I learned in that process is, one, how difficult it is to run programs, how difficult it is to bring in outside organizations because of their vendor process, getting a background check. I learned that if a kid is sick on a certain day, well, I hope it's Tuesday because that's the only day that the nurse is here. And if you're having a mental breakdown, it can only be Thursday because that's the only day that we have a psychologist. I also learned the power that these programming opportunities have for students in allowing them to feel part of the community, engage with one another, increase test scores, increase attendance, and increase discipline. And so I'm here running to create those opportunities for more CPS students. Thank you.
Thank you both. And we're going to start with the same question for you that we did for 7th district candidates. In your 8th district, there are 65 schools. That's allowing parents, students, teachers, principals, and local school councils to represent. How do you see yourself engaging with all those stakeholders, making sure they all feel represented and cared for? How will you deal with issues like what arose at Curie Elementary a couple of years ago, where parents and staff were personally going in on the weekends to clean really dirty conditions because the janitorial services weren't up to par? Mr. Gutierrez, will start.
I think first and foremost, we have to empower our local schools. And what I mean by that is that we have to have local school councils, principals, and administrators, and those school teams really be in charge of the school. So since I'm running, I send out a weekly, actually, newsletter to over 3,000 constituents. That includes lots of parents and teachers. So that's some of the things that I continue to do. In Council District 13, there's a committee that's representative of all the teachers of that particular city southwest side, principals who are in that role, and I also would like to be able to establish something similar district-wide, have a wide variety of different teachers, parents engaged and involved. And I think, we have to make sure that our schools are properly funded.
Mr. Ponce?
So right before this, I was meeting some parents from the back of the arts community. And one of the big things that they express is how it is difficult for them to get accomplished. They want to come in and help. I had a lot of parents who were like, what if we create an opportunity where parents can come in and be aides in the classrooms? I said, well, that's wonderful. I think that's like a fantastic opportunity. But well, how do we do that? It's never been transparent for CPS. And so what I want to make sure that I do is, one, that I communicate with those families, that we set up time to meet with one another, but let's also make sure that it's accessible to them. Because when I was a teacher, there would be board meetings, there would be at 10:30, and at 10:40, they send an email, and don't forget there's a board meeting happening in 10 minutes ago. And so, as a parent, how do you get involved in CPS when it's already difficult and they're creating barriers for you? So it's about opening it up for them, making it accessible, translating things for them, and making sure that I meet with the individual communities, because each of them are different, and I need to make sure that I take into consideration what each of them are bringing to the table, what they need, what their community needs, because it's different, maybe similar, but it's going to be different and individualized, just like our students are. And so I want to make sure that I create plans with them, not for them. I want them to be part of the process, and I want to make sure that I include their inputs and that they help me create a strong CPS together.
Thank you. And Mr. Ponce, you've been a music teacher for years. Mr. Gutierrez, you've helped fundraise for a school. So with that experience, how do you intend to use your position on the school board to support the arts, music, sports, after-school programming, or in the last forum, before-school programming as well, to make sure it's sustainable in Chicago public schools? And we have a little addition to that question from someone in the audience asking specifically how you do this for grades 5 and lower, where sometimes opportunities for sports might not always be. And Mr. Ponce will start with you.
Yeah. As I went through my process in the first couple of years of creating a robust band program back at the arts, one, I had to learn how to fix my own instruments. I had to learn how to write grants. I had to partner with organizations. I was able to bring in teachers from the People's Music School to help me with things, to teach private lessons. I was getting things donated. There's this great organization called Bikes and Music, and it's like this old couple who just love music and they love bicycling, and they donate things to CPS schools and old instruments, old bicycles. And so it's about creating those partnerships, but then also making sure that I am utilizing the community, and if they want to help in any sort of way, that I include them in those conversations, that I make it accessible to them. And I think about partnering with organizations who really need to reevaluate our vendor system, because right now, if you want to become a vendor, there are so many obstacles to do so. So we can say all that we want, we're going to partner with these organizations, and the universities are going to come in. But if the system itself is created to be an obstacle for those organizations, it doesn't matter how many exist. It doesn't matter how much money they're offering, if they are not approved vendors, if they are not in following any sort of what the system is now, they're not going to be able to be involved with us. And so really, yes, we need to bring those partnerships, but before that, we really need to reevaluate our system and make it better.
I think one of the things that I've always done is, right, first thing you do is you look at the standard operating procedures, right? You start to see what exactly is being done and what of those policies and procedures need to be tweaked. Look at what other schools are doing. Engage parents, try to find out exactly what they want to do, right? I have spent over 25 years in Chicago and have made numerous philanthropic relationships. I currently sit on a committee called the Chicago Community Trust, and that helps fund local nonprofits that are Latino-led, Latino-run, and it would be kind of in a similar format, right? Identifying funding for those particular schools and bringing it in, but also making sure that our schools are hubs, right? So many different businesses, so many different people want to get involved. And yes, every school has red tape, and so trying to figure out ways that we can cut that bureaucracy and get people engaged and involved each day in the lives of our students.
I'm going to go to current day and all of the news that's been around CPS. I want to ask you a couple yes or no questions, and then I'll give you an opportunity to explain. There's been this disagreement between CPS CEO Nader Martinez and Mayor Brandon Johnson. We're having full budget deficit this year. One, do you support taking out a short-term loan to cover budget gap? Yes or no? Mr. Gutierrez.
No.
No.
Do you believe CPS CEO Nader Martinez should keep his job?
As long as he wants to work with students, yes.
Yes.
If you were on the board today, then, if neither one of you is willing to take out this loan, how would you address the budget shortfall that CPS finds itself in both this year, about $300 million, and then around $500 million up to 900, $500 million, and then up to $900 million for the next several years? And part of this question, this is also from the audience, if there was an idea like a loan, or any other idea that comes from the mayor's office that you disagree with, do you feel comfortable standing up and telling the mayor, no, I disagree with this idea? Let's start with you.
So I think there's a couple things, right? I think for too long, our school system, our city has kicked the can down the road, right? Too often. And currently 56% of property taxes are supposed to be allocated to the school system. And we all know that that's not necessarily what goes to the school, right? So there's almost $600 million that gets diverted, that gets put into tip funds, right? So that's one thing, right? Making sure that, hey, 56% of the dollars supposed to be allocated over to the schools, let's get that done. The other question relative to the mayor, I think, we have to, as a school, we have to be able to look at the financial picture and make sure that we have an accounting for all the dollars that are being spent. We need to make sure that, right, because also we want more dollars to go into the classroom, right, to our students, right? Also, that's what we want. We want students that have much more dollars being spent on them. And if the mayor had an idea that I didn't agree with that, wouldn't be the first time that I would tell him no.
When I think about what steps have been taken in CPS's history in order to save money, a lot of them are always a quick buck. We prioritize the custodial staff because we were thinking we could save money. And what ended up happening as a result is it wasn't as reliable, the classroom weren't as clean, relationships with custodians and our students and staff, those were great. I remember I used to talk to this gentleman, his name is Felipe. He would talk about Mexico, he would talk to the students, and it's such a loving relationship with them. And the students felt better because they had somebody in their community who cared about them, cared about their school, and in turn, the students also fed into that and wanted to make the school better and wanted to keep it clean. And so I want to make sure that we don't make decisions where we make efforts to save money for quick bucks, to privatize, to get to some outside organization, when in reality, in the short run, it can help, or we think it helps in the long run, it actually doesn't. The other thing that I want to make sure to do is continue the conversation that I had with legislators and alders, and how can we involve them in the process. I just had a conversation with Alumni, and we were talking about how can we create more opportunities for students to get into the workforce and then come back into CPS right away. And so how can we do that and continue that process?
Thank you. And CPS and the Board of Education basically aligned with the mayor's vision for CPS, recently adopted a new 5-year strategic plan. It calls for focus on strengthening neighborhood schools. It wants kids to learn more than one language, and it wants CPS to measure student success by more ways than just test scores. Do you support this plan? Have you voted for it? And do you support the mayor's vision for CPS that is laid out in the strategic plan? We'll start with Mr. Ponce.
Was this just yes or no or a full response? Oh, okay. Sorry. I support the plan because it takes into consideration the whole student and not just the test score. A test score is just one way to look at a student. We need to look at them socially, we need to look at them emotionally, we need to think of them as communities, and how can we foster that and make that stronger, and in turn, how can we make the community stronger? I want to make sure that students who live in a neighborhood don't need to travel halfway across the city because their school doesn't have a particular resource. It still boggles my mind. I didn't grow up in the city of Chicago. I went to the school that was closest to my house. I didn't travel, 10 miles away on the other side of the city. And so why are we forcing our families to do that? Why are we forcing them students to fight for positions, to fight for more counselors, to fight for more nurses, to fight for more staff? Why are we doing that in our neighborhood schools? And why are we not prioritizing them and making sure that those are safe places for our students to belong?
I think it's a good beginning for the plan, right? The devil's in the detail. I think that I would love to see, when I see a strategic plan, I want to know how much it's going to cost. Right? How much is it going to cost us to do this, right? To implement this plan, right? How do we make it come to fruition, right? The one part that I still struggle with is when you look at the 8th district, the 65 schools, we probably lost in this new budget formula probably $13 million, right? In terms of dollars that were once there, that no longer. So schools budgeted their budgets and they balanced them because they didn't hire teachers, right? They didn't hire positions, but it wasn't because they were given dollars. Right? So that's one thing that we have to really look at. And I think that the other piece is, right, that these plans, again, require some more input. I think, right, that hopefully there's some flexibility there, right, because not one school fits all model relative to what we're doing. Right? So every school is unique, every district is unique and different. And I think we need to make sure that we keep that as part of our plan as well.
Thank you. And you both, and we've heard a lot about this, about spending on these elections and school board elections nationwide. You both have supported big ways, both financially and through endorsements by special interest groups. Almost $300,000 has been spent on this race, according to our analysis. Mr. Ponce, you have the backing of the Chicago Teachers Union. Mr. Gutierrez, you have the support of the Illinois Network of Charter Schools and Urban Center Action. Groups that have been backed by business and charter school interests. If elected, how will you ensure that you're acting independently on any given issue? And do you think it's a problem for so much money to be spent in school board elections? We'll start with you, Mr. Gutierrez.
So I'm going to say what I said yesterday and I'm going to say it in office. That while I have been endorsed by these groups, I've been on the record of two things. There are 2 moratoriums that currently are on close. One is school closures, and the second is additional charter schools, right? So they know where I stand in that if I'm elected, those are things that I as a board member that I've never done, right? I think that I'm going to keep my independence the way I always did, right? I'm going to do what's best and what's right by the people who elected me. And that includes, if I do get elected, that those people get vote for me, right? Because we're representing the district. And priority is our students, right? Our students are the reason why we're doing this. This is the reason I do this. I think elections in general are always expensive. And, it's part of, as someone told me the other day, right? It's the nature of the beast, right? It's how communities need power. And I think that, from my side, I would be an independent voice that I've always been. No one's walking. Even if you look at the dollars they give me, it's very, very small. Roughly 90% of the dollars that I've raised have come from individuals, people that I have made friends with over the course of the last 35 years.
Thank you.
To your question in terms of how I can respond to some of these groups, I think it's harder for me to go against my wife than it is than it will be to go against some of these my endorsements. But it's you highlighted endorsed by the teachers union, but I'm also endorsed by more communities that make up schools. Because it's not just teachers. I'm endorsed by painters, I'm endorsed by other laborers, custodians, I'm endorsed by family organizations, former students that have been coming out and they've been advocating now that we can elect the school board, they've been making sure to come out with me, and really our primary goal, yes, is to get me on the board, but also really just to make sure that we inform our communities and make sure that they have the knowledge so they can exercise the power. Because it's one thing just to say you haven't elected a school board, but it's another thing to actually go to somebody's door and say, hi, I'm happy to meet you. Let me tell you about why this race is important, how it affects you, how it's going to affect the school, and why you should be invested in this one, because it's one of the more important ones as opposed to some of the larger ones. In terms of like, we need to vote for our president. Yes, that's important. But really, these local elections and about informing the communities is what we need to make sure that we do. Again, I am one that's going to stick to making sure that CPS is stronger. I've experienced it myself as an educator in the district, and so really, my only loyalty is to the students.
Thank you. And until last year, CPS enrollment had fallen for 11 straight years. It's rebounded a little bit the past couple of years. There are a lot of schools across the city where enrollment is extremely low, but there are also some success stories of reinvesting in schools and seeing their enrollment turn around. There are also here on the southwest side a lot of schools that are overcrowded and they need more space for their students. How would you address these two issues that you're finding in different pockets of the city? Do you support closing any schools? And do you support building annexes for schools that are over-enrolled? Mr. Ponce, we'll start with you.
So it's important that we look at the root causes. If we have a school that we deem is unsuccessful, why is it unsuccessful? When I was in my classroom, if a student was not successful at a certain melody, they couldn't play a particular tune, I looked at why. I didn't just say, well, kids failing, they're going to fail out of the class. We can't have that same mentality where we look at these schools and we're like, they're failing, we need to close them. No, that can't be the solution. We need to look at schools that are successful. Okay, they have these programs. Okay, they have this much staff. Okay, they have this teacher-to-student ratio. And then look at how we can apply that to those other schools, as opposed to just saying, we're going to put you and let you stand on one leg and hope that you survive. Because you're not going to if you're being, if your resources are being taken away. It's hard to be successful. I once had 45 students in my classroom. It's very difficult to be or create successful experiences for students when you have so many barriers, such as there's so many students, how do you provide feedback to all of them? And so these schools that don't have those resources, how do you expect them to be successful if we don't have that funds? We need to make sure that we have equitable funding across the district. We can't close schools. We see the effects of that, the several school closure, 2,000 students that are possibly going to be rehomed with their families and cousins and uncles and nephews. More people are affected than just the students.
To answer your question, we have schools, as you said, that are overrun, and we need to have additional access in medical schools, right? This school here could use an access. Hubbard, down the street, could use an access. Kennedy in Garfield Village could use an access. And I think one of the things we have to do is very work with our legislators, both in Washington. So one of the things I do is I have work with the mayor's office, work with the administration of the CPS and say, hey, let's go to Washington and go meet with the entire congressional office. Let's go down to Springfield and meet with all the legislators. But we're not going to Springfield by ourselves. I'm going to bring me some business people. I'm going to bring me some former legislators who understand the Atlantic. And you want to know the first people we're going to do? We're going to have fun. But we're also going to go have conversations with our friends in Coal City, in East St. Louis, to find out what their needs are. Right? That's how we start to build big coalitions, so that we can bring home the dollars that are going to be needed to help build new schools, to help fund some of the programs that we're talking about here, right? You can't go down to Springfield with the current administration did, with their partners at the CTU, and how say you own me. No, they don't own me.
Thank you. Your constituents, and we asked this the last set of candidates, many of them have kids to go to neighborhood schools. They also have kids to go to self-enrollment schools, magnet schools, some go to private schools, and if you sent your kids there, Mr. Gutierrez, Mr. Ponce, your kids are too small still to go to schools. You said you would expect to send them to CPS. But this is an example of you being, first and foremost here, of the wide range of interests and constituencies in the district. How will you represent all of them, particularly if your kids aren't in CPS, you've never sent them to CPS, or you've never worked with CPS? We'll start with you, Mr. Gutierrez.
I'm not sure I work with CPS. Why I did this. First and foremost, every student that lives in Chicago should have a quality education, right? And parents, of course, here, should be able to make that choice in terms of where they send their kids, right? You should be able to send your kid to the type of school that best meets their needs, right? It shouldn't be dictated by, hey, the only schools we're going to have are the neighborhood schools. The only schools we're going to have, they're part of our network, right? Charter schools, and every student in every school is successful. Guess what? We, as a community, are the beneficiaries of this, right? I want to create a school system, ladies and gentlemen, where when the next Amazon comes here to Chicago and says, man, I'm going to pick Chicago as where I'm bringing my corporate headquarters. You know why? Because they have the talent necessary for jobs now, but also future jobs.
So I think, so what you were saying, you were mentioning about 5 different things: magnets, selective enrollment, charter. When talking to community members, some of them don't even know what some of these things mean, nor how students are going to benefit from them, how are they different from another. And I asked the same question: why do we have so many different options that make it confusing for our parents, rather than offering them a school that has the resources that they need? I went to a high school that we could take 18 classes. We could take auto shop. We could take wiring. I could take business. I could take AP stats if I wanted to. All of the options were there. I don't understand why in the city of Chicago we have a mentality of like, well, these schools are going to pit against each other and we're going to fight for each other's students. It's a strange mentality in terms of a community that we've accepted, and I think what we need to be moving towards is how do we create spaces in where communities who can't go to some of these selective enrollment schools because of transportation issues, who can't go there because of the language barrier, who can't go there because of the systemic issue, how do we create spaces where the schools that are in their neighborhoods are just as good a fit for them as a student who chooses to go to a selective enrollment school because they have the ability to do so?
Maybe for a little bit of a related question, what do you love, and this is from an audience, what do you love about this place and the people here? And this place being this district, the district that you would serve as a school board member. We'll start with you, Mr. Ponce.
Yeah. You know, for me, again, I moved into the city. I grew up in Blunt, which I think faces a similar demographic as here in the state district. And what I enjoy about it, one, is how diverse it is. I also think it's reflective of me and my upbringing. There's a lot of Latinos, but it's also very diverse. And I have a lot of Chinese people in my community. And so I love that there's that diversity. But what I want to make sure that I do is that I empower them. I think of, I had mentioned back in the arts, for example. When I was talking to those parents, they were asking a lot of questions because they were confused about what CPS was going to offer them and how they could be involved. And so really, like what I love about it is that I have a community who's so vocal, and they want to make sure that regardless of their status in the country, that they are creating the best opportunities for their students, and that they're leading the way so that their students can have better lives for them. And I want to make sure that I am collaborating with them in pushing that mission forward and making sure that they inform me so I can inform the board and I can inform CPS.
So if you think of the 8th district, it is very unique and it's very funny shape, right? But it is a community that is made up of immigrants, always has, and that's home for it, right? And you have a community of nothing but hard-working class people who want the best for their children, for their families, for their community, right? And you also have a community that will stand up and fight when there's an injustice, which is really, really beautiful to see, you know. This past Saturday, the community stood up to Brandon Johnson and said, hey, we want our police district. We want our police district. And they came out with all of our legislators who were there in one spot. So that's part of what I really love about it. It's diversity, it's cultural. I consider myself a foodie. There's lots of great food in our neighborhood. And you can go almost anywhere. I would argue that the southwest side of Chicago, Don Archer, probably has the best pizza in Chicago.
I want to go back to one of the questions we asked earlier about the budget. And of course, there's been sentiment about this loan. There's been, talk about let's get surplus and using that to fill the budget gap this year. And of course, there's state and federal funding that people have advocated for. But what happens if none of that works? Do you support cuts in schools? Do you support furloughs or layoffs? What is your solution if none of these short-term, band-aids don't come through in the next few months? And we'll start looking at severe years.
I think, one of the things, as I mentioned earlier, right, we have structural deficits that have been there for ages, right? And at some point, someone has to deal with it, right? Someone has to deal with it. And it will be the job of the next board to really deal with that, right? To make sure that we're not kicking the can down the road every single year and begin having conversations and relationships and building plan. So if we're going to use the strategic plan, let's put dollar on what it's going to cost us, right? Let's figure out, do we have a loan administrative office to figure out how much of the resources in the district are actually going into the classroom. So that's also where we want them, right? And I mentioned that there's some things that we didn't find. Here's the other piece, is in the last closure of schools, we still have many of those schools are strong books, right? You just can't get rid of the building, right? These pipes break. They're still part of our budget. That's terrible. And so we need to be able to, again, figure out what it's going to cost us in terms of our strategic plan, make sure that we are fiscally solid with the dollars that we currently have, but also then be willing to go down with a plan to Springfield and Washington and engage all our stakeholders. And again, not doing it alone. Not doing it alone. We have to talk to everybody on both sides of the aisle. Thank you.
I mentioned earlier how, in my experience, CPS has taken a lot of quick solutions because it seems to save money. And one of the long-term solutions that are short-term that I think they keep putting off is making sure that we put money into renovating our buildings. We have these buildings that they're inefficient. How are we saving power? How are we saving energy? Do we have efficient lights? Do we have efficient water systems? Is this actually safe water for the students to drink? I remember my wife teaches biology, and she would have her kids do this science experiment where they would go to the water fountain, and they'd be like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't drink this because it's going to kill me because it has so much lead in it." And so, if we want to have long-term results in terms of saving money, we need to, one, look inside and make sure that we're actually investing into our buildings to save money in that way, and that's the way to close that gap. The other thing that we need to do is we need to take a look at some of these contracts that we have. Again, I mentioned that we've had an air bar contract, and it doesn't actually end up saving money. It doesn't employ our communities. And so how can we take a look at some of those contracts to make sure that, one, not only are they actually efficient in terms of how much dollars we're putting into it, but also making sure that it's involving our community, because that's going to create a better system for it as well and actually get through in the long run. And then I want to make sure that we have conversations with parents that we know what the needs of the actual CPS buildings, and then working with legislators to solve those things.
So those are a few solutions, a few alternatives you would pursue, but just 10 seconds each. I still want to reiterate the question. If it came down to furloughs or layoffs or school cuts, is that something you would support or propose? Because that is something that has been floated next to the CPS administration if there's no money. 10 seconds, Mr. Gutierrez.
I think it would have to be a combination of both. Many nonprofits are facing the same piece. Where there's lots of COVID dollars and there's a lot of hiring happening, right? And so you have to figure out what is essential. Again, making sure that the local community school kind of determines those things, right? The local school council principal.
So when it close 50 schools, we're still dealing with it. You've highlighted yourself. So we're going to have these cuts, and it's actually not going to help because we've done it already. It hasn't worked, and then communities that you say you're fighting for might not actually benefit in that process.
Thank you. Now, lots of parents are seeking out dual language programs for their children. There seems to be more of them available on the north side than the southwest side. Do you have a plan to expand dual language options in your district? And if so, what is that plan? Mr. Ponce, will start with you.
When I started at Back of the Arts, I was one of the only Latino teachers there, but it was a 90% Latino school. Which bothered me because why shouldn't staff be more like a student? We can relate to them a little bit more, that they have a figure that's more similar to them in terms of their experiences, or something that they can possibly have a better relationship with, more connected, or have some sort of stronger bond. And so one of my issues, or one of my core things in running is making sure that we hire staff that's representative of CPS and National Market Statistics that is state after CPS, and then making sure that we train them and actually make CPS a place that's somewhere where they can see their end career. So we have a lot of teachers who come to CPS, and then they have community CPS, and so we need to make sure that we keep those excellent teachers. So make sure we provide training for them, and that we especially target teachers who have that endorsement, and make sure that we prioritize training our teachers and getting the skills for that, because we have students who need those services, who benefit from an ESL endorsed teacher, but we don't have pathways for our teachers to do that in an efficient way, and we're not targeting those teachers, and so I want to make sure that we go through that process to benefit those students.
Question, Nader Issa.
Yeah, it's about dual language programs. What would you do? What's your plan to get more of that into your district?
So I think one of the things we have to do, right, we want to work with ISB and make sure that we're doing everything we can to, on the pedestrian side, if there are, there's always rules and procedures relative to this, and making sure that we can get more parents involved, paraprofessionals in the classroom, get them certified with proper certifications, work with the local university, right? Chicago is rich with schools of education, right? And making sure that we're working with those institutions to bring some of that talent pool into our schools, partnering with other nonprofits, right? That normally do some of that work as well. That's the other way that we're able to address it's a shortage, not just in CPS.
So we're going to squeeze in a couple last questions. For these, I ask that you respond in 30 seconds or less. This one is from the audience. How will you support our LSC during principal renewal, contract, and principal selection? Principal contract renewal and principal selection. Mr. Gutierrez will start with you.
Our LLCs,
Specifically during principal contract renewals and principal selection.
right, I think, right, that's very important, right, the leadership of a school, so CPS should have a process by which they are providing training to each of the local school councils and making sure that someone from the human resource department is working hand in hand with them, but also making sure that we have parents involved. So it should be only the local school council making decisions, but we should have input from all parties engaged in that school community.
I think my principal was up for contract renewal 2 times when I was at Gutierrez. And one of the things that was apparent was that even parents need to be involved, but even teachers didn't know, students didn't know. And so if we want to make sure that LSC is made up of teachers, it's made up of community members, it's made up of students. And so we need to make sure that they are actually involved, that we have experiences in where we provide time for students that have knowledge in terms of what that's going to be and how they can be involved and shape that process.
And you might need 30 minutes rather than 30 seconds for this one, but we're going to stick 30 seconds. This is also from the audience. Who and what do you think caused the biggest problems our schools face now? We'll start with you, Mr. Ponce.
The question was who and what made the biggest problems? Well, I know for one, we need to acknowledge that there was a time when we did not pay into the pension fund, and so when we're thinking about that budget gap, there's some irresponsible decisions made then. And when I think about, again, about saving a quick buck, when we think about privatizing and sending our money instead of private interests, those are places where we're sucking money out of public schools, we're taking it out of there and putting it to other places that are not held accountable and where we can't just really track it in the same way.
I mean, it's pretty evident, right? This crisis didn't just start yesterday, right? So there are administrations that have been responsible for this. But in the current state of things that we're in, right, you have to have leaders. Leaders are people who lead and bring people along together. And I do not believe that Stacey Gates and the mayor of the city of Chicago have done a job of leadership in bringing people together. They've done a good job of dividing the city, but not bringing people together.
And that's the last question for tonight. We're going to move on to closing remarks. Mr. Gutierrez, we'll start with you. You have 60 seconds, please.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I got into this race really simple. I got up in the morning, I got my taxes, and they had gone up by 40%. Remember what I said, our community is hard-working community. So what does that mean in my neighborhood? That means everyone got the same 40% increase in rent. But if you guys are looking for someone who's going to be transparent, who has experience in building relationships, I cannot stress that enough. Relationships, the ability to go across the aisle, the ability to bring people in who have different points of view to the table, to bring everyone along, parents, students, teachers, local school council, community, elected officials. If you look at the coalition that I built with the number of endorsements of elected officials who are supporting the unions that are supporting the communities that are supporting, I'm the candidate who can get that job done for you.
The best person for this, because I was a teacher in the district, I understand the system, I understand what are some of the barriers that we have. I'm committed to the student experience, first and foremost. That's what matters, and involving the community in that student experience, that's what matters. and then bringing other people along, not to have them make the decisions, but make sure they're supporting those decisions. Again, I had mentioned about we want to bring outside organizations with CPS and hidden staff. I understand those things. I understand how to work them. I understand the issues that we need to solve them. And I understand the path forward and how we need to involve everybody in that process and be the middle person. Because I'm not going to be the one that's going to necessarily lead it by myself. I want to make sure that I support the vision of the city of Chicago, especially my district, in creating a CPS that's going to be helpful for everybody, not just one particular group of individuals.
Thank you both, and everyone give it up for District 8 candidates.